We really appreciate you joining us today and for registering for this webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about how to prepare for your organic inspection, along with Kendra and Emily Durrell and Amanda Rose Newton. My name is Juan Rodriguez, and I am part of the SE TOPP team. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. As Kendra mentioned, we ask that you please hold on to your questions. You may write them in the chat, and we will do our best to get to them at the end of the presentation. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda Rose, who will start us off in today's webinar. Amanda Rose?
Thank you. So I am Amanda Rose Newton, and I'm the Technical Assistant Specialist here at FOG. So we're going to jump right in and go through some acknowledgements. And I think this in and of itself is kind of preparation for inspection because it covers quite a bit of the acronyms. USDA is very acronym heavy, and as you navigate through your organic system plan, you're going to see several of these. But this webinar is supported through the United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA, and this is part of the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, which is TOPP. Since we're in the Southeast, it's Southeast TOPP. And it is a program of the USDA Organic Transition Initiative. You'll often see this labeled as OTI when you're looking through various documents about it. And this is administered by the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service, or AMS, and the National Organic Program, or NOP. You're going to come across NOP a lot in the language and documentation for your organic documents. So there are 5 key programmatic areas that we do work in SE TOPP. And I'd like to note that you do not have to be somebody who's ready to transition tomorrow. This is open to anybody who's farming in the Southeast. So our 5 key programmatic areas are the Farmer to Farmer Mentorship Program, which I know a few of you are actually involved in who are a part of this webinar. We also do some community building, networking for organic farmers and those interested in transitioning. Technical assistance, which is part of my role here at SE TOPP, and training. There's data collection, of course, too. It wouldn't be a USDA project without that data collection piece. And we also do workforce training and development. So we have quite a few partners. It's not just us who are leading the charge here. As you can see from this very busy map, the country is divided out into various regions. The Southeast includes North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, as well as the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. So we have quite a bit of reach. And you can see surrounding this map, these are all of our partners. We have some that are just based in the Southeast, and we also have national level partners as well. So depending on where you are in the country, you're going to have a different implementer, but we all do work together for this program. So we're going to dive in now and talk about the basics for getting ready for your organic inspection. There's definitely some things you can do to prepare up front that'll make the process a lot easier. And throughout this webinar, we're going to be offering tips and some basic things that'll really help with the process. So the overall structure for this webinar is that we're going to be talking about preparing for the initial inspection, navigating the inspection process, the post-inspection follow-up, because that's always something that happens and isn't usually discussed in webinars like this. And we'll also have a question and answer session at the end.
So
Go ahead.
Sorry. I'm going to get us going here with preparing for the inspection. And before we get into some of those tips for how to prepare for the inspection, I'll quickly go over the organic transition process as well as the organic certification process. So before crops can be certified organic, you must manage your land organically for 36 months, which is 3 years. And the organic transition process starts after the last application of a prohibited substance. So if I applied a prohibited substance to my farm today on May 30th, 2024, my date of organic eligibility would be May 31st, 2027. And something that is optional for transitional producers is to develop a transitional production plan, which is often referred to as the TPP. As Amanda Rose said, we have a lot of acronyms. And if you do want to, you can have that TPP reviewed by an organic certifier. If you did opt in to having it reviewed, you would be assigned a reviewer who would assess the plan, make sure it is complete and compliant with the organic regulations. And this is a new document, and it will serve as an outline for your organic practices and procedures. It can help you to get a better understanding of the organic requirements, as well as serve as practice for filling out an organic system plan, which is required for certification. And during that last year of transition, or really at any point during your transition, you can apply for organic certification. The transitional land would be certified transitional, and any eligible land would be certified organic. So if you have transitional and organic land on your farm, they can both be certified just under different certificates. And a lot of times it's helpful to apply for certification in that last year of transition. The certification process can take a good amount of time. So if you're already certified transitional, you can receive your organic certificate as soon as you're eligible, and that can cut down on some wait time. Moving on to the organic certification process, this journey starts with your application. And in this case, the application is the organic system plan, referred to as the OSP. The OSP is different for each certifier. So you would receive that directly from your certifier, fill that out completely, which again details your organic farming practices and procedures. You would submit that to your certifier, and once it is processed, it will be assigned to an initial reviewer. That reviewer will go through the OSP, make sure it is complete and compliant, and follow up with any requests for information to address any gaps or clarification needed. And after the initial review is finalized, the next step is the on-site inspection. So you'll be assigned an inspector, they'll reach out to schedule the inspection date and time, and they should also follow up with some insight on what they'll be focusing on during that inspection, and typically tell you some specific records or documents that you should have ready for review. The on-site inspection will occur, and the inspector will complete their inspection report. Once that report is completed and submitted to the certifier, you will be assigned a final reviewer. This can be the same as your initial reviewer, but doesn't have to be. That final reviewer will conduct another review of the organic system plan, make sure that is fully complete and accurate based on the inspection report and findings. This would be the time that any additional RFIs or adverse actions would be addressed. And once those are resolved and the review is complete, a certification decision will be made. Before your inspection, it is very important to familiarize yourself with the organic regulation. This is often referred to as the rule, and they can seem very long and overwhelming, but you should really familiarize yourself with those key standards that are relevant to your operation. And if you do that, your inspection will be a lot easier and typically make a lot more sense. Your certifier should provide a copy of those standards with your application package. And there's also an online copy available, and we'll have a link to that at the end of this presentation. And here you can see section 205-403, which are the organic regulations surrounding on-site inspections. And in this slide, I'm going to go over some of those key concepts from the organic regulations surrounding organic inspections. So before an operation can gain organic certification, it must undergo an initial inspection. This is referenced in the regulations as the initial on-site inspection. And once you are certified, annual inspections are required, and those are typically referred to as annual updates or sometimes just regular inspections. And the annual inspection will occur once per calendar year, and they are required for sustaining organic certification. The organic regulations also require inspection of all production units, facilities, and sites. So during the inspection, every aspect of the operation must be observed. That includes your fields, pastures, and barns, along with any storage areas or processing areas. The inspection will focus on sections of the operation covered in the organic system plan. But one area that's often confused here is that if you have organic and non-organic production on your farm, the inspector will verify that there are procedures in place to prevent commingling. So that means that the inspector can access non-organic portions of your farm to verify compliance. The presence of an authorized representative is required during the inspection. So this is typically the person that's responsible for certification or who filled out the application. So you can have other personnel involved at the time of inspection, but the inspection must be conducted with the authorized representative. And not all of the regulations will be relevant to every operation. So as you go through them, really look and focus on the parts that apply to your operation. Here we've outlined some of the sections that would be important to familiarize yourself with as a grower. So that would be the production requirements, materials on the national list, that's the approved and prohibited substances, and the record keeping and labeling requirements, all very important to know. Another area of preparation for an inspection is document review. To start off your document review, you should go through the organic system plan, make sure that it is current and complete, and you have all of your necessary attachments. Some of those attachments can include a soil test, the list of crops being grown, your field location and maps, as well as any organic labels that are currently in use or plan to be in use. If you have updates that haven't been submitted to your certifier, make sure that you have those available at the time of your inspection. And in general, it's a good rule to just always keep a complete and current OSP on file at all times. Next, you should verify that your approved input list is up to date. So your approved input list is going to be all of the inputs used on your farm. And if you're adding any new inputs, make sure that you have the label ready to review for your inspector or submit those to your certifier before the inspection. In general, you should always submit inputs for approval before you use them, but if there's something that you haven't used that you want to, you can always give that label to your inspector. Record keeping is another area that's really big for your organic inspection, and you should really review all of your records before the inspection, including input purchases and sourcing. That's going to be your receipts, invoices, and delivery tags. Go through your planting records, and with planting records, that does include documentation of your seeds. So if they're certified organic, making sure that you have the label, which shows the USDA organic symbol. Or if you're using non-organic seeds and planting stock, having that commercial availability search of at least 3 sources and verification that it is non-GMO and untreated. Should go through your field activity records. That could include cultivation, weed control, anything that is happening on your fields, you want it to be recorded. And in your input applications, you should have the material applied as well as the location, date, and rate or quantity used. And finally, any harvest and yield records or sales or transport records. Record keeping is very fundamental to organic certification, and it shows the inspector and your certifier what's happening day to day on your farm. Another way to make your inspection easier and more efficient is by doing a self-audit beforehand. Self-audits can help to identify any deviations from the organic standards and provide an opportunity to resolve some issues before the actual inspection. And one thing you can do in a self-audit is a mass balance and traceability exercise. So that's going to track products from the field of origin to final use or sale. And Amanda Rose is going to go into those in more detail in our next section. Another way to prepare for your inspection is to ensure organization and accessibility of the operation. You should make sure that your records are neatly organized and stored in an area for easy retrieval. You should have that designated area where all of the records are being kept, so you don't have to be running around on the day of trying to track everything down. You want to make sure that your equipment and facilities are easy to access and ready for viewing. That includes removing any unnecessary clutter or obstacles that may get in the way when you're trying to access different areas of your operation. You want to have all of your inputs readily accessible for inspection, and it's very helpful to just keep the approved input list on hand or keep it stored in that input storage area just for the inspector to easily be able to look at that while reviewing your inputs. You want to set aside a designated area where you and the inspector can review records and documentation. That's going to be somewhere that's comfortable and well lit. You'll have a table and chairs for yourself and the inspector, and this is going to be the area that you should probably store those records. All of these things can just help to streamline the inspection process and make the day easier for yourself and the inspector. Here are some final tips for preparing for that inspection day. You want to make sure that you can devote the time and attention needed to complete the inspection. The inspection timing can vary depending on your operation and the inspector that's coming to your operation. So in general, it's good to just have that whole day set aside to focus on the inspection. You should also make prior arrangements for someone else to handle any work-related tasks or family commitments. Of course, things may come up, and that's totally understandable, but as much preparation as you can to just have all of your energy just to the inspection on that day. And make sure that you have enough gas in your vehicle to reach the more remote parts of your farm or facility. So if you have a field that is 30 minutes away, just make sure that you can get there and back. And all of these things are relatively simple, but they can really make the day go much smoother.
Okay, I'm really glad that Emily brought up the timing aspect. Honestly, that's probably the question I get the most is how long is the inspection going to take? A good rule is 4 hours at least, so taking the whole day is not a bad idea. Obviously, that differs depending on if you're doing just crops or just livestock or processing. If you have multiple scopes, as we call them, going on, that can greatly add to the overall time. And oftentimes it'll take less than that. So keeping that whole day window open is a good way to go. So in this part, we're going to talk a lot about what actually happens during an inspection and what the specific role of the inspector is. So one of the reasons I love my role here at FOG is as a technical assistant specialist, I can actually give more detail and more insight into a lot of questions that growers and producers have. Inspectors, unfortunately, are not really able to give too much tips and insight, especially during the actual inspection itself. So do keep that in mind. The role of the inspector is really to observe and evaluate your agricultural production as well as the handling systems that are going on. They'll do a field tour of your property. They'll also look at your storage if you have that on site, and any other sort of facilities on property in addition to all of your records. And they'll use that to paint a very objective picture of what your farming operation looks like. So inspectors really do not make any decisions. They're just collecting this evidence, if you want to call it that, and then submitting it on to the certifier who does make those decisions after. So certifiers do have the final call in all certification decisions. So the inspector's role is really not to instruct on how to comply with organic standards. A lot of questions they're not really able to directly answer. They will give you an exit interview, though, at the end of the inspection that will list all of the things that occurred during inspection, which papers were updated, which ones were received at inspection, as well as go over any additional information that needs to be turned into the certifying office or any possible non-compliances that were noted on site. So you will have that information before the inspector leaves the property. So on inspection day itself, so that OSP or organic system plan comes into play here. That will be very much reviewed by the inspector and looked at against what is happening at your operation. So all of your records will be reviewed, especially when it comes to traceability and mass balance exercises. For those of you going into an initial inspection, this is a little bit less of a issue, but especially down the road as you do make sales and have that documentation, you want to make sure that you have it all readily available. It doesn't have to be kept in any sort of fancy way. A handwritten notebook that kind of serves almost like a diary of just your field activities is perfect. One thing to note is to make sure that for harvest and planting dates, you do kind of have an idea of the amount that was harvested and the amount of seeds that were planted. That really helps, especially with that second one, the mass balance exercises. What the inspector is looking for there is they want to make sure that the amount of seed purchased matches up with how much is harvested at the end of season. There really shouldn't be very much variance there. And if there is, that can sometimes be an issue. And with traceability, that's looking at the purchase of organic materials and inputs, so seeds or maybe a fertilizer or something like that, and then being able to trace that from the actual harvest all the way back to purchase. So keeping all seed invoices, all of your non-GMO documentation, all of your material input receipts, you can keep them all in the same binder or however you want to do it. A lot of people are moving to electronic records, which is great. Just make sure that all that's in a handy spot because it will be reviewed at inspection for sure. And the best part, in my opinion, is the tour of the facility. So that's just a chance to ride along with the grower and producer and look at all the fields, the buildings, and the storage areas, and make sure that it's in line with what is written out and described in the organic system plan. Because within that, you will have to write about your storage facility, if any pest control is used, all those sorts of things. And then I mentioned this earlier, but the exit interview is always at the end of the inspection, and it's just a nice document trail for you to remind you what we went over, as well as any additional information that you need to submit. So my friend, mass balance and traceability, these are the most difficult, and honestly, this is the area that producers and growers tend to struggle with the most, just because it is keeping track of so many different items. So I briefly mentioned what a mass balance is, but that's to demonstrate that there's enough organic ingredients, if you're a processor, or products, seeds and so forth, were purchased, produced, harvested, or managed to equate to the final product or amount harvested during the audited time period. So saving those invoices and receipts really is important there, as well as making those notations in your field activities for when things were planted and when things were harvested. Input use, especially things like manure and compost, you also want to be keeping track of those dates too. Oftentimes those will be part of this next one, traceability. So that is to demonstrate that an organic product can be traced back to its field of origin or the supplier if you're a processor. And that's using documented linking elements. So typically that's going to be in the form of lot numbers. If you're a small scale produce farmer, you might not have lot numbers. You might be going off of field numbers or storage bin numbers. Those work fine too, as long as it's traceable. Like you have to have that consistent throughout your paperwork. So that's really what they're looking for there. So invoice numbers too will count for this as well, especially for seed purchases and things like that. So you can link it back to that initial purchase. So typically the inspector will come in, they'll select a product. So that might be seeds, that might be, a final produced good, and they'll attempt to follow its trail of production by linking those elements that we described on the operations records and documents. So the inspector has to be able to verify that that product can be reconciled with the products that are produced and received on the operation. So just keeping those receipts, keeping track of manure application dates, planting dates, what field everything was planted in, the amount of seeds, the amount harvested, all of that will save you a lot of time and headache when it comes to this point in the inspection. So we do have this really nice little flow chart here that gives you some examples of mass balance and traceability. So you can see from that first one there, it's just looking at an activity that's happening, maybe that's planting, looking at the records that correspond to that, linking that to a second activity. So maybe that was, harvesting and looking at those records. And then the last activity there could be sales, and then looking at those sales records as well. So there's some other examples here for looking at the crops. Purchasing the seeds and the seedlings is the activity 1, and the record that corresponds with that would probably be the receipt. It's also important to note, since we're talking about seeds here, that keeping the bag tags or the package that the seeds come in is also really good practice. Oftentimes inspectors will ask for those. Sometimes they'll ask for the organic certificate as well as non-GMO statements and a seed search if you're not able to use organic seed. So the activity 2 there, like I mentioned, planting is a pretty common one. So, and that does not have to be fancy. It can just be a date and the field and how much approximately. And then the third here, the harvest sales piece, that's one of the easier ones. Just save all of your purchase records there, your sales records, your settlements, and your transportation documents as well. Another thing that we look for is making sure that you have clean out records for maintaining organic integrity once the product leaves your farm. So that's something that usually a certifier will have a copy of a form that they like to use, but you can also kind of just make your own that just has a signature showing that the truck was swept out and cleaned. So this is a really nice tool to kind of walk you through what you might need in order to have a successful mass balance and traceability. So with interacting with inspectors, being transparent is good. Inspectors always love that. Asking questions is also good, because even if there's some things that inspectors are not allowed to answer directly, they can send you to people who can. So always ask questions. And do provide access. We do have to look at all of your land as well as your storage and your records. So make sure that there is access to all of those things. So communicating challenges is also really helpful because that helps certifiers improve, especially if a documentation is something that is confusing for many individuals and wordage and so forth, as well as just things that are going on with your organic operation that might be more geographically based. All of that information is good information. Taking notes is also important. You will get that exit interview from the inspector, but having your own notes also just helps with that as well. And do follow up too. Sometimes you'll be asked to send in things to the office. Make sure you do that. Also follow up to see if there's anything else that they might need. That's always appropriate and welcome.
So I'm going to be taking the post-inspection follow-up section here. So after conducting the inspection, the inspector will compile all of their findings and observations into their inspection report. And you can expect that report to be completed in about a few weeks, just depending on the individual inspector and anything that's on their plate at that time. And once the report is completed, it will undergo a final review. And during that review process, that's the chance for requests for information to address any discrepancies or questions that may arise. And if your reviewer identifies areas of non-compliance, you'll be notified of those findings and be able to address them with a corrective action plan. Based on the inspection findings and final review, the certifier will make a decision regarding organic certification. If the farm is found to be in compliance with organic standards, you will receive an organic certificate. And along with that organic certificate, you'll receive a copy of the inspection report and exit interview. Now, going into more detail about non-compliances, minor non-compliances refer to issues that are relatively minor in nature and they don't significantly impact organic integrity. So certification can still be granted or continued before correction of minor non-compliances, but you will be provided with a specified time period by the certifier, and during that time, you have to correct the identified minor non-compliance. Non-compliances, on the other hand, indicate issues that are more significant in nature than minor non-compliances, and they may pose a risk to organic integrity. You can address non-compliances through a corrective action plan, and that is required to resolve a non-compliance. And a non-compliance must be resolved before certification can be granted or continued. And everyone involved in certification understands that non-compliances can be intimidated, but I promise they are not the end of the world and they are correctable. And it's really just your certifier doing their job by documenting any deviations from compliance or the organic regulations. And it's important to remember that the goal is to bring you back into compliance, and your certifier is there to help. So when you receive the non-compliance, it will clearly cite the specific organic regulation you are not complying with, and the comment section will go into detail on the specific issues identified during the inspection and give some more context for understanding those issues. This section will also reference any attachments, and you should carefully review the comment section as well as any attachments that are provided, and that will give you a better understanding of how to address that non-compliance and what will be needed in your corrective action plan. Of course, if you have any questions about the findings, you can contact your certifier. So the certifier is your primary point of contact for all matters related to your organic certification. And while they are not allowed to consult you on corrective actions, they can provide clarification on the non-compliance and any issues that you have with that. To resolve a non-compliance, you have to develop a corrective action plan. So this will include a detailed description of the actions taken to address each finding, and the action should be clearly defined with timelines and responsibilities. That helps to ensure accountability as well as monitoring. The corrective action plan will also include objective evidence to support those actions taken. This can be documentation, photographs, or records. Basically anything to validate the implementation and completion of your corrective actions. And once you have submitted that corrective action plan, the final reviewer will make sure it is adequate, and once it is approved, the non-compliance will be resolved.
Okay, so with maintaining your organic compliance, doing the regular self-assessment that we pointed out earlier is a great way to stay on track. Also establishing internal controls, especially if you're on the livestock or processing side of the house. That is going to be really key, just managing the volume of feed or product. Having some sort of internal system that really puts the checks and balances on that will be helpful. Engage with industry resources. There's tons. We have quite a few here at SC TOPP that can be helpful with making sure you're maintaining organic compliance. Documenting everything. Cannot stress this enough. Like, it's way better to have way too much stuff when it comes to inspection than not having enough. So write it down, especially in field activities. There's no real rule on what you put there. The periodic reviews and updates is also a good thing to do. Most certifiers will require you to do some sort of OSP update every year, even if you really don't have much to update. It's still just a really good habit to get into. as well as just have a general commitment to continuous improvement. There's always going to be small things to improve here and there. So it's a good frame of mind to get into. So some of our final tips, just remember the importance of meticulous documentation. And again, meticulous does not mean fancy. So handwriting stuff is totally fine as long as it's there and it's available. And you can feel free to do something fancier and take advantage of a lot of the really cool electronic software they have for record keeping. Internal compliance assessments are also key to making sure that you have a full understanding of the ins and outs of your business and maintaining transparency during inspections. So utilizing the knowledge that's gained to strengthen your organic practices and ensuring ongoing compliance with organic standards. You definitely don't want to get the same non-compliance year after year. That's not going to be a good thing. So just making sure that you are improving and off of the last inspection report is always a good thing. So continuous improvement is key, and also incorporating feedback from inspections to continue to enhance your organic integrity. So the key takeaways from this webinar, for the certification process overview, there's steps that we covered from application to inspection. There's consistent adherence to organic standards throughout. So really taking the time just to kind of look through the NOP rule. You'll probably get sent a copy when you do apply with a certifier. Just to give it a quick read. I know it's really dense and not the most exciting, but it does really help give you more of an idea of what they're going to be looking for when it does come time for inspection. So understanding those organic regulations, conducting an internal compliance before inspecting occurs is also a good practice. Being able to do those mass balances and traceability exercises on your own. Having overall cleanliness and organization of your records and materials. Again, I'm going to stress this a lot, but it does not have to be a fancy thing. Like just having a simple notebook is fine as long as it's organized and easy to navigate. So for the inspection navigation guidance, procedures and expectations during inspections, just be aware that there's only so much that your inspector can answer, and know that there will be a tour of the property as well as looking at the storage and records too. So navigating on-site procedures and document reviews, having clear communication and cooperation with certifiers. And for post-inspection, making sure you address those non-compliances quickly is really key. You don't want to wait on that too much, as well as implementing strategies for ongoing compliance monitoring and improvement, and leveraging that feedback to continually enhance your organic practices and uphold integrity. We do have some resources here. I'm sure a lot of you are interested in where all this material is located. There is a Transition to Organic Partnership Program. Again, the acronym for that is TOPP, and it has a lot of these resources kind of collected in one easy place. And for us in the Southeast, a lot of these resources are based on the Southeast region. There's also the Florida Organic Growers website, which has a lot of resources, including resources that are not necessarily for people who are in the process of transitioning at this second. There's the USDA Organic Regulations page, and this is where you can find information on the rule that Emily brought up earlier. And there's also that handbook that you can go through, which is the next point here, the National Organic Program Handbook, which has your guidance and instructions, as well as additional tips for managing inspections. There's the new TPP, or Transitional Production Plan. And as Emily noted, this is a great free tool that you can use to kind of practice getting everything together like you would for an OSP. That's going to be required of you when you do apply for certification. So there's also organic transitioning references, organic training, as well as the OID, which is the Organic Integrity Database. And that lists all the organic growers within any region. So that's a nice tool too for networking and kind of having a better feel for others and who their certifier is and what products they are certifying. And if you go through the certification process, one day you will also be in the Organic Integrity Database. All right, and I guess it's questions time.
So thank you, Amanda Rose and Emily. And as you just said, yes, it is time for questions, and we do have a few questions. And for anyone who would like to ask questions as we're wrapping up, please feel free to put them in the chat. The first question that we have, and I guess it's maybe a summary of what we've been discussing from someone is, have always been organic and a nature preserve. So how do I start this process?
So I can take that one. I think the first step is really figuring out who you want your certifier to be. And once you decide who you want your certifier to be, reaching out and getting their organic system plan, and then completing that organic system plan. That's going to be the first step towards organic certification. If you are a transitional facility, so it seems like based on what you said, you probably wouldn't have had prohibited substances in the past 3 years, so you could go right towards certification. But if you are transitional, that first step is just starting to follow organic practices and not applying prohibited substances to the land.
All right. And for everybody that's wondering, we will be sharing our presentation and the slides and obviously, the information that, we've gone over today. Another question is, I breed, save, and use my own seed for my main products. How does that work?
Ooh, that's a good question. So most certifiers will actually have a save seed form that you'll need to fill out. And that is how you're able to track those seeds. So again, having the original information regarding the seeds that you're saving is also very important. But again, most certifiers can help you with that and usually have their own documents for how they want you to track that.
And you can
Right.
certify your seeds as well. So if you did want to sell them, that could be a product that's added to your organic certificate.
Would they need to also be certified as a handler besides a grower?
Not for seed saving.
Okay.
Unless there were complex processing activities. In that case, you might have to be certified as a processor and handler. But if it's those simple on-farm processing of just taking seeds and storing them or cleaning them, that would not require processing certification.
Okay. Next question. How do regenerative farming practices fit within the organic grower process?
First question, too.
So I think I can take that. With the organic regulations, there is a focus on natural resource conservation and regenerative practices, feeding the soil, making sure you have a healthy soil system and making it as internal as you can. So a sustainable system rather than always relying on those outside inputs. So I think that within the organic regulations and within organic certification, regenerative practices are very suitable for an organic system.
Yeah. And one thing, because obviously, and I say obviously, it is a term that we're hearing a lot, lately is, regenerative. Organic is regenerative. For people who are seeking, some people may be seeking, and it is not part of TOPP, but people who may be seeking regenerative organic certification, that would be a separate certification that they would have to contact the certifiers who offer that. But regenerative and organic, are, they go together. They go hand in hand.
Yeah, it'd be like the equivalent of going with a certifier that also offers non-GMO. certification. Organic is non-GMO, but you can also get an additional certification that highlights regenerative if you would like that.
Right, exactly. Next question. Can you name any tracking, recording, documentation software for USDA organic farming? I guess this is related to record keeping, maybe.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
you can even just use Excel. You can have your own Excel like formulas that you use and just like different sheets to track different things on your farm. It can be very extensive just using that. But I don't have any specific recommendations for programs. I don't know if Amanda Rose can speak to that, but I think Excel is a great tool to use for keeping your organic records.
Yeah, the only time for me personally that the more expensive record keeping software has been very beneficial is for larger processors who do quite a bit of handling and storage. Nowadays, a lot of the storage facilities have their own software that they use to track incoming and outgoing lots. So when you're of that size, it does kind of pay to have that kind of record keeping software. But for smaller farms, Excel is fine.
Next question, and this question might be for Amanda Rose, who actually happens to be a beekeeper. Is honey certifiable? I've read the section of the law and it's still unclear to me.
Yeah, I think it's unclear to a lot of people.
But the question is it certifiable? That's the question. Is honey certifiable?
So there's no standard for organic honey. So that's where it gets a little bit complicated.
However, some certifiers do certify honey, if I'm
Yes.
not mistaken.
They do.
And it would be one of those things that we recommend for you to contact, to search for certifiers who certify honey, and then discuss with them what the requirements are to be able to certify that honey. But as I think Amanda Rose is saying, it can be very challenging and extremely difficult to comply with not just obviously the organic regulations, but what those requirements for certifying organic honey currently are. So. Somebody else wants to know, how do I get a copy of the rules to get started with? Are there any guidelines, guidance on vermiculture farming? The first question really about the rules. If you go to the National Organic Program website, and you can just Google National Organic Program, USDA National Organic Program. Yes, you should be able to find the copy of the organic regulations, organic standards, and download them. And it is, I think, a really good idea always to have a copy of those rules. Those of us who've been, or have worked with certifiers and have review plans and all of this that don't really memorize the organic regulations, that would be crazy. So we always keep a copy of the regulations handy. So, but if you go to the National Organic Program, you can find a copy of the organic regulations for sure. And I think that other question, or part of the question, was guidelines for vermiculture farming.
And the organic regulations do not have specific guidance on vermiculture. So that wouldn't really be something that you would look towards the organic regulations for, but I'm sure there are many different resources out there that would give some more information on vermiculture.
Yeah, and definitely brush up on the rules for composting generally within the NOP.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any more questions? I think we cover all the questions in the chat, and we still have a few more minutes before we wrap up. We appreciate everybody being here today, and just listening to our speakers and asking those really good questions. But are there any additional questions that those of you who are here today might have for Emily or Amanda Rose? Marty, I think you're raising your hand. Do you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for all of your help and your great answers. I know I hammered you, but your presentation was very evocative. All those questions just came up because your presentation is really very good basis. Thank you so much. And thank you for the link in the chat. The question that I wanted to follow up with a little bit more is the seed. I come from a long line of female hybridizers. My great grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, all bred different kinds of things. I'm breeding right now hibiscus for food stock. And the reason I ask the question is because it has not been possible to find anything like a hibiscus seed that meets the organic standards. Sorrel, there's plenty of sorrel seed out there, but it's not been through a process. So I gather from what you're saying that I would start with what I have and go through a process to get it certified as organic. Is that accurate from what you were answering?
Yes. So, and I can add to sort of what Amanda Rose and Emily have been saying is certainly if you want to certify the seed, as they were saying, you would have to first, begin by certifying the farm. You really are certifying the entire system. And the seed, saving and seed production are part of that system. So whatever crops, including, the hibiscus and some of the other crops that you may be saving seed, as part of your organic plan, those would be included in your certificate. One thing that is important is that you would have to tell your certifier that if you're growing hibiscus, for example, that you're also intending to certify the seed, not just the flowers or some of the other things that you might be, using from the hibiscus or any crop for that matter. And that was why I was asking the question to them about, because if you're going to be selling it and using the label on seed packets, and that was why I was asking the question, would they need to be certified as a handler? But if it's simple on-farm handling, and that would be very simple, correct, Emily? That if you're doing it on farm, you're basically cleaning the seed and then putting it in small packets, then you'll be certified as really again as seed producer as well as part of your organic plan.
Okay, one more follow on if I may, and I thank you again so much for your time. I also create several products with the hibiscus. Now, at what point do I'm going to be leaving as a food producer at that point, not just the raw material, but raw hibiscus, which some of it is drying it for tea, mixing teas. Some of it is syrup. Some of it is actually a kind of a dried candies that are organic, that have no sugar. Those types of products, at what point? I'm going to cross a boundary here into food production, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And can you give me a clue what that boundary looks like? Because it's still organic and it has certain properties, but who is the authority that I would be talking to at that point? And do they talk to each other?
So once you begin transforming products and doing those more complex processing activities, that would be when you would seek a processing certification if you want those products to be labeled as certified organic. And you can have multiple scopes certified. So You can certify the organic crops as well as the organic products. So you would have two separate certificates though, but you could get them from the same certifier. So you'd have your organic crop certificate, your organic processing certificate, and then one list typically called the product verification form, and that will show everything that's certified for your operation. But you can have multiple scopes certified by the same certifier.
Oh, thank you. And would this be USDA or?
So this would be whichever certification body you are choosing to work with, and they would be accredited by the USDA. So a great way to look at certifiers is going into the organic integrity database that we have linked in the presentation here. That will show all of the certifiers for USDA organic, and you can look at those people and look at their website, kind of see what you're looking for, look at prices, things like that to determine which certifier you want to go with.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course.
So I think we've arrived to the end of this webinar. It is 1 o'clock. We want to thank everybody who registered and participated in today's webinar. As we've indicated, this will be available on our website. We'll provide a link to everyone who was here today. We thank you so much for being with us today, and really appreciate you coming to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.